call the meeting to order of Energy and Climate. We do have a quorum. Members, let me just give you a little summary of where we're going to go today and perhaps tomorrow. We have a number of bills up today. We should be able to get through all of them this morning, but if we cannot, we have a room reserved for this evening, so we will recess. I expect session to be longer today, so just keep that in mind. If we do not finish tonight and session goes a long time, finished this morning, session goes a long time, we can't meet tonight, we do have a room reserved and we have it posted for tomorrow at 12:30. I hope we can finish before then, but if it takes that time, it will take that time. With that, I have the first bill. Representative Long. And I would welcome Dr. Snyder. Members, there are two parts to our mission, and one of them is dealing with climate change adaptation. And with that, I would like to move for possible inclusion, House File 1251.
Representative Wagenius has moved her bill. Would you like to present your bill?
Okay. So in order to be smart about adaptation, we need to know what is getting ready to happen to Minnesota in terms of climate change. And
speak into the mic?
The best person to talk to us about that is Dr. Peter Schneider, and we will have him chat with us because this bill is basically about funding a program or that he can do to help all of Minnesotans, not just some of us, but all of us. Dr. Schneider.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I appreciate being here today to talk to you about this project. I am a professor at the St. Paul campus in the Department of Soil, Water, and Climate. And I want to talk to you about the climate science work that we're doing at the U and how we might be able to help the state. Minnesota is undergoing climate change. There's little doubt about that now. We have good evidence in the observational record and our understanding of the physics about what's going on. It's affecting all aspects of society, whether it's things like the moose population and the northern lands and waterways, whether it's the forest, whether it's human health, whether it's our infrastructure and our industry in the state. Every aspect is getting affected. So we need to understand how can we adapt to make for a more resilient society, and that's what this project aims to do. Why this project is necessary is because we have a lot of information out there, but it's not the information that's needed to make decisions at the local level, or the level where people are living. The typical data that we have is at a very broad level that doesn't provide information that's necessary. So this project is basically to look at providing this local-based information. Traditionally, when you look at a climate model, they were designed for the globe. They were designed to assess the health of the planet at the global scale. They weren't made to provide information at the local level. So if you look at this particular climate model here, you can see that it's made up of a bunch of chunky blocks that represent the state, so that there could be very little information contained between, say, here and St. Cloud. What we can do then is we can focus on an area and we have the ability to provide information at the local scale so that we take this area and instead we get this. So here's the Twin Cities in this highly downscaled projection. So you can see the urban heat island of the Twin Cities metro area, you can see the cooler surrounding areas, but there's a lot more variability, and that's what this project aims to do. If you look at the next slide, here's an example of what the state looks like in terms of precipitation. That's not really great information at the local scale. So we can, again, zoom in on an area like the upper part of the state there, and we can simulate the precipitation much more carefully. So what are we going to do on this project? We would like to produce these downscaled data for the state of Minnesota at a 3-mile by 3-mile grid cell resolution for 1970 to 2099, so the end of this century. We would use multiple global climate models as input to produce this higher resolution data that would be useful. We would then deploy a web portal to disseminate these results. We would work both with state agencies and other interested parties to provide this data on a publicly accessible web server, and I can't stress that enough. This would be data available to anyone in the state, whether you're a state agency, whether you're a student, you're an interested citizen, or something else, you would be, this data would be made available. And then finally, we would have education and outreach. We would develop web-based educational materials to provide for people who are going to use this data, what the limitations are. We would provide training workshops in collaboration with University of Minnesota Extension, especially with our state agency partners. And then finally, I do want to mention that the in-kind support on this type of project would be huge. The University of Minnesota Supercomputing Institute would provide over $2 million in-kind support. It's a tremendous facility that we have at the university. Most Big Ten universities do not have supercomputing institutes, so we could do a lot of our work there. So I just want to say thanks for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the testifier. Just kind of, so the $411,000, that will be just simply to kind of create the website, and will there be any ongoing maintenance with that cost, or will there be anything held in reserve, or?
Well, as I understand it, the $411,000 was a placeholder in the bill, not by me, so I don't know what the exact dollar amount is at this minute. We're still putting together the budget for the, with the university. But I would say that there is money in there to do the downscaling work with the people, researchers that we have at the U. And then there would be support for the server and the development of the server to provide the data to the people of the state.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you. And so just kind of as you, it looked like you were going to kind of create a model that would maybe go off into the future to 2099. So will there be kind of a tracking to say, like, so this year, this is what we think is going to happen this year? Is that kind of what the, is what it's going to look like, or?
Professor Snyder.
Yeah, so the way this works is we take a GCM that is already existing, that has run out to 2100. We take the data from that and we put it into another model that then produces the higher resolution data. That's what dynamical downscaling is. We go back to 1970 for the express purpose of having the observational record up until 2018. For example, and we use that data to assess the quality of the simulation to assure that it's in the parameters of what was observed. So there are checks and balances along the way, and we certainly can go back as the project goes forward. You can look and say, well, how well did the model do relative to the observational record?
Certainly. So
Representative Swazinski.
thank you, Mr. Chair. So that'll essentially be, so you'll have one model, one simulation, kind of a make or break. Will there be adjustments made along the way?
Professor Snyder.
Well, first of all, we would be doing multiple models, not just one model. But yeah, certainly there's checks and balances that we do along the way to make sure that the model is performing as we would expect it to. I mean, we're certainly not going to feed, garbage data that comes out. We would make sure that it's quality. I mean, we care about that.
Chair Wagenius, did you have?
Yes, I think maybe we should talk about some of the practical applications of this. I think about some of the things going on in my own district and how we're accommodating rain. And folks, we're not planning for as much rain, so we have pipes that are this big when they should have been this big. And so I think about MnDOT and MnDOT knowing where they're going to have a lot of rain. And so planning ahead for a road that's going to last 50 years, what size pipe do you put in? I mean, the outcome of this model is the practical application for not just MnDOT, but for a farmer. It's the practical side that we haven't talked about that I am most interested in for Minnesotans, not just state agencies, but any business where they're going to cite, where they're going to be careful to do citing that we may not have thought about before.
Representative Swazinski?
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair, sorry. And just kind of, so along the lines, so let's say we're looking at kind of a 5-year projection and it's wrong. How will that be kind of displayed on the website?
Professor?
Well, okay, first of all, you have to separate a climate model from, say, a weather model. So when you're talking about a weather model, Dave Dahl on TV, and he gives his weather forecast based on that weather model. It's really good about 3 to 5 days out. That's about as far as you can go with a weather model. That's calling for an exact temperature for an exact day or an exact chance of precipitation. Climate model doesn't do that. It provides you the average weather, or the average climate for a given time period. So it's a lot easier to get that right than it is to get right what it's going to be 5 days from now. So I don't foresee any way of going back, a decade later from now with that data and saying this is all wrong or something like that. I don't anticipate that would be needed. Based on the way that these models provide the data, which is the average condition. So if I average every day of the year for 2018, I can get the general response quite well with the model.
So, Mr.
Representative
Chair,
Swazinski?
so it's more going to be just generalities. You're not going to, so you're going to take a 10-year clump of time and say, this is what we think might happen in it. And then, so you're going to have rain or not rain or dry or that sort of thing, and from a temperature standpoint, or?
Professor?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between climate and weather, is it's the average conditions of what you would expect over a period of time. So it's not providing, I'm not going to be providing, it's going to rain on July 2nd, 2055, or anything like that. But it will say, maybe in July 2055, this is where we're going to have rain in the state.
Representative Swazinski, if you could make this your last question. We have a couple other questioners on the list.
Okay, thank you. And then just, is there, this, I'm guessing this is not a new idea. Is there currently any, national sites out there that kind of pertain some of this information in generalities for regional or states or any of that? And then what from at this point, what do you think the cost will be? Obviously, the 411,000 is a placeholder. What do you think that number is going to wind up at?
Professor?
The dollar amount would likely be more like probably $600,000, given where we are now versus when we started originally talking about this. It was a little bit lower cost. And I'm sorry, I forgot your first part of your question.
Sorry, I had to squeeze two into one. No, the first part of the question was, are there other models out there?
Oh, right, yeah.
Professor?
Thank you. Yeah, there certainly are other efforts that are ongoing with respect to the modeling, but nothing at that high resolution for just Minnesota. there is broader data that's available, existing projects that have been done, but they're really at a much coarser resolution, more like 50 kilometers. Not the high resolution that we would be doing at about 4 kilometers.
Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's never a good idea for a member to pick on the chairwoman's bill, so I won't. But my question, it kind of pertains back to what Representative Swazinski was talking about. Although I want to thank you for clarifying the fact that those weather people on TV, when they start talking 2 days out, are just making it up. Just making it up. What's the magic about 3 miles? That's about 6 kilometers, maybe 5 kilometers. Where are we here? What's the difference that we have a 50-kilometer space versus a 3-mile square? Why do I need 3 miles versus 5 miles?
Yeah.
Just forget the chair.
I'll just, and I called him madam too, so.
Sorry, I tried that.
Yeah, the 4 kilometer or 3 mile resolution is kind of the lower end of what you want to do with these models. You can go to 100 meters with these models. We call them large eddy simulations, and they can be used to discern very highly detailed stuff. However, the models are very computationally intensive. So the higher the resolution we go, the more computing power we have, and the more difficult it gets to be able to run longer simulations. So the idea then was we settled on the 4 kilometer because it is high enough resolution to provide information to people at the local level, but not so taxing that the Minnesota Supercomputing Institute, bans me for life. So.
There are some blessings to being banned for life,
Representative Mahoney.
Thank you. I guess I am kind of wondering if, in my legislative district, I have industrial spaces, I have residential spaces, I have high residential use spaces, I have retail spaces, and I don't want the answer here. But here's my kind of question about this is, what am I going to use it, or what are the business owners in my district going to use this for? And then on top of that, for planning, we hamstring development in many different ways. Is this another tool to hamstring development by requiring another T to be crossed and another I to be dotted? So those are some of the questions I have, and I'll bring them up with the chair.
I do want to just mention, if I can, if you look at the back of the handouts, I didn't go over those slides, but there's a series of slides that are things that are related to how this would help agencies within the state government, particularly MnDOT, Minnesota Department of Health, Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Bowser, variety of agencies. So
I'm just worried that my wife will find out that I'm using, some chemicals on my garden that she says no to.
Representative Baker.
Mr. Chair, and this is a question to the author, I guess, Chair Wagenius. The funding source, I know that you're looking at possibly the RDA account. Would this be a possible legacy idea or a LCCMR? Just because, again, I think with the work you're doing on this isn't, I think it's got some good points to it, but maybe just asking why the RDA, and maybe is there other options for funding, Madam Chair?
Chair Wagenius.
I am expecting that we will get some general fund money for this committee, and I would expect that we will switch to general fund money.
Thank you.
Representative Wagenius renews her motion that House File 1251 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, members.
Chair Wagenius.
Thank you.
Did we take
Representative Lippert, 2566. If you could.
Mr. Chair, did we open it up for public testimony? I don't know.
No one
if we
had
did.
signed up in advance to testify.
I think just protocol would be that we would ask at least, so.
Sure, thanks. Representative Lippert.
I'll move that House File 2566 be laid over for possible inclusion. Welcome to the committee, Representative Lippert. Tell us about your bill and your testifier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this bill, House File 2566, directs the Commissioner of Commerce to undergo a study of the benefits and costs of developing a green bank in Minnesota. Green banks are financial institutions that can leverage public funding to attract private capital for clean energy projects, as well as other green investments. The state of Connecticut was the first state to establish a green bank, and they did so in 2011. The Connecticut State Green Bank Connecticut Green Bank has been very successful. It's driven over $1 billion worth of clean energy investment in the state using less than $200 million in public funds for that investment. The success of the Connecticut Green Bank has led other states to adopt green banks as well. They've been established in New York, Maryland, Hawaii, California, and Rhode Island. And other states are currently conducting studies of green banks, just like this legislation proposes, states like Colorado and Mississippi as well. As we seek to respond boldly to climate change, as a state, we need capital and financing too. A green bank can both fill existing gaps in the green financing landscape and accelerate our overall response. We currently have a variety of options for financing clean energy projects in Minnesota, and a green bank will not supplant those options, but can help coordinate them while leveraging much more private capital at the same time. A green bank would also be of great benefit to low-income Minnesotans. The complexity of the state's current energy efficiency programs pose an access obstacle for many low-income households, those who would benefit most from accessing these energy efficiency programs. A green bank can streamline these processes by standardizing and centralizing them. A green bank could also leverage private capital for the sake of energy efficiency projects, which would again be of great benefit to low-income households too. There are some green projects that currently aren't being financed because they aren't large enough to be able to secure private financing. Some projects that local governments want to undertake fall into this category. A green bank can step into this gap, leverage private capital, and bring more green projects to fruition. So the bill before you outlines the boundaries of the study. We want to know exactly what green banks are doing in other states, the types of projects they finance, the different models employed, the ways they are capitalized, the gaps a green bank could fill that private banks will not, and what kind of model and direction will be a good fit for the state of Minnesota. The Commissioner must submit this report by January 1st of 2020. So with me today to say more is Jeremy Kalin, and I'll let him introduce himself as well.
Good morning, members. Madam Chair, Representative Lippert, I'm Jeremy Kalin. It's a pleasure to be here as a former member of the House, and it's my first time actually testifying in the new Capitol, so it's great to be here. I had to find my way here. I know that a lot of you all have been through that same experience. So I had the pleasure, of course, of serving for 2 short terms, 4 years here in the House, and after moving out of my district in 2010, spent 8 years as CEO of a mission-driven company, Eutectics, that was focused on mobilizing capital for the public good. And I've been fortunate enough to be directly involved in $283 million of privately financed solar and energy efficiency projects over the last 10 years, and helping build $4 billion new billion-dollar privately capitalized financing tools for solar and energy efficiency, among others. I've also been lucky enough to serve as senior advisor to the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, NCEL, an organization that I hope all of you consider joining on both sides of the aisle, because it truly is a bipartisan national organization that helps to serve as kind of gap-filling capacity for state legislators and to help see the broad landscape of opportunities for action on the environmental front. through that lens, I've been lucky enough, both as a legislator when I was in your seat and in the senior advisor role, and of course, as a CEO, as a business owner and executive, in looking at the development of green banks, infrastructure banks, clean energy financing hubs, and other means of mobilizing private capital for projects where, of course, we shouldn't rely on and don't have the public funds to just write public checks for things like solar on top of public buildings or private buildings, for energy efficiency in small businesses, and as Representative Lippert mentioned, for low-income tenants and low-income homeowners. I will just say that the notion or the term green bank is actually a little bit misleading, not on the green side, because it is, of course, environmentally friendly and economically attractive, particularly for investors and for those building owners and beneficiaries. But it's actually not a bank. It's a coordinating entity that truly tries to mobilize private capital by sort of pre-shaping investment opportunities, doing some of the hard work that if it was a $100 million project, for instance, wind projects that I know are in many districts out in suburban and exurban areas and rural areas. But also if you knock two zeros off, you're talking about $1 million, solar project on a series of schools. That's a lot of hard work to put together the financing, the procurement, the technical assistance, and then knock another zero off of that and put it at $100,000 for small businesses on main streets. And it turns out that it's not really, you don't need a developer alone, you need someone to do that hand-holding all the way through. As Representative Lippert and I have been discussing the concept, and I know some members of this committee have already engaged in a conversation with me, and I'm happy to be a resource. The goal is not to at all supplant existing tools. We actually have some really great tools that are, in some cases, best in the country. But it's actually to coordinate those tools into a single kind of access point, and also to mobilize our community banks, our large financial institutions, our credit unions, and what limited public money is there for project capital into a streamlined user interface, as you will, to make it really easy to access the technical expertise, the contracting, and the capital to do what are otherwise good projects. So I like to just describe this as making the right thing easier and really to focus on economic development across the state.
Representative Long has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Representative Lippert, for bringing this up. Before I was in the legislature, served on a neighborhood council. We wanted to do a solar project. Our solar project was a little too big for any individual to finance it, and turned out it was a little too small for just about anybody else to finance it. We couldn't get a bank interested. We spent a lot of time, spent 2 years looking for a way to finance the project, and something like this would have been really helpful for a group like ours to try to help get a small project off the ground. And I think study is a really good first step to make sure we're doing this right and filling the gaps that exist in our state in terms of financing. So just wanted to thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Representative Long. I've had some similar experiences too in work on some energy efficiency projects and trying to seek financing and running into those obstacles over and over. So I'm interested in an entity that might be able to help move projects like that forward.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the testifier. Just kind of looking at the bill, it says, on line 1.15, they shall contract with an independent consultant. What's your cost estimate?
Madam Chair, Representative Swazinski, great question. I think Representative Lippert and I have been having discussions about the specific scope, and I think actually the honing in a little bit more on underserved and untapped markets will help limit that scope. I don't know the exact cost because it's going to depend on speed and scale. And as in the old NASA used to say, we can do it fast, we can do it safe, we can do it cheap, but only 2 of the 3 at any one time. So I think the real question is going to be how big, how robust the stakeholder groups need to be to ensure we're not duplicating, et cetera. But this is not a break the bank kind of study. I think there's a real opportunity to build on some work that's been done before, both in Minnesota and as Representative Lippert shared elsewhere. So happy to work with the department or the University of Minnesota if they end up being the target contractor for it, and work with you and Representative Lippert and any other members on that cost.
Representative Stephenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there anyone from the Commerce Department here, like what they would estimate the study, I mean, the fund, I'm looking at the bill, what the funding mechanism is and where the funds would even come for it? Is there any of that in? Like, are we just going to direct the Department of Commerce to do it? Or?
Somebody from the Department of Commerce. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chair Wagenius and members. My name is Megan Verdea. I'm the Government Affairs Director with the Commerce Department. We are reviewing the bill now and working on the fiscal costs. I don't have that amount for you at the time, but we are reviewing.
So, Madam Chair, I assume fiscal, have you been asked for a financial, fiscal note on this, staff, or?
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, I have requested a fiscal note from the Commerce Department on this, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then just kind of going along, so just from a Senate companion, is there a Senate companion, Representative Lippert?
Madam Chair, there isn't a Senate companion currently.
There isn't, okay. And then just looking back on the bill, there's an area 2.17 and 2.29, and then 2.15 through 2.17. Why is the language, is that?
What was the, excuse me, Madam Chair, Representative, what was the first lines you?
So 2.27, 2.29, and then 1.15 to 1.17. Those two separate sections?
Oh, I think they're duplicative section. Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, one of the things that I appreciated about committee hearings is thorough reading. It looks to be duplicative language, if I can see as well, so good catch.
I didn't know if that was on purpose or,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just asking you guys.
I think if it were to survive, maybe just hitting send twice on the email might suffice in meeting both requirements to make the same report.
I don't know, does the chair want to change that?
C and E are the same language.
If you would like to, would you like to make a motion, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I can do the motion, ma'am. Or Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we remove line 2.15 through 2.17. I think that would be the correct place to do it. And then simply and insert and send to the Commerce Department Committee, Commerce Committee on 2.15. Oh, yeah, do that. So I think I've got it. So we would remove 2.15 through 2.17, delete, and then add on line 2.19 and send to the Commerce Committee. 209, sorry.
So I thought we were looking at the duplicative here.
Because I think the Commerce Committee would like to, I mean, obviously, we're dealing with banks, and the Commerce Committee does deal with banks, and I'm guessing this bill is, I'm not sure what the motion was, but I'm guessing this will go to the Commerce Committee after this.
That is not a friendly amendment. We're not going to be accepting an amendment that is moving it to another committee. It's already been to one. I think the friendly amendment would be to delete line 2.7 to 2.9 because it's already in the bill. So if I will make that motion to delete 2.7 to 2.9. Does that work for members? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The amendment is adopted. Question from Representative Bierman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of my questions were answered already now, but I just wanted to express support for the study, and I think this is a very good idea for a style bank that could be a quasi-public or a nonprofit entity and will reach all levels of social and economic people that are looking to do green projects, and I think it's a very good idea. So I just wanted to speak positively about that, and I really like the contractor coordination side of that, where there's some assistance through that process for customers. So thanks for bringing the bill forward.
Representative Baker.
Madam Chair, thank you. I think this is to the testifier. I think I understand it a lot better once you kind of explain it. This is really not a bank bill, but it's more of a, I look at it almost like a broker bill. You know, the heavy lifting that goes into putting projects together. As I have seen in so many committees here, we see deals put together a lot, and this one is more focused on green energy, and I think that's fine. Why do we, I guess I'm just kind of, why do we need the state to get involved in that when typically brokers make money on deals when they put them together like this? So help me understand, why is the role, as a former representative yourself, why should we stick our nose into this in the future when it's already happening and it's probably profitable for the right brokers who are successful? Why do we need to do this? And either one can answer.
Madam Chair, Representative Baker, great question. And I think that that it might be a good idea to insert some language that reiterates the point I'm about to make, which is where capital is currently flowing and where the private sector is helping projects get over the top, as you just described. From an SEC and a commerce securities regulation perspective, it's not actually classified in the technical trade term as brokering, so we don't need a broker license to do this work, but it is brokering of relationships, of some capital, of expertise, et cetera. And so where that's happening, the state should not be, the public should not be sticking our nose into it, other than kind of as we do to ensure that the kind of bounds of permitting and general environmental regulation and wage laws, et cetera, are being followed. This really, for instance, I know there's some discussion that may be had on Representative Long's community solar bill later this morning around low and moderate income, let's say multifamily properties around the state, whether it's owned by public housing or by nonprofits under, or private, or entirely privately owned and unsubsidized. Energy efficiency, those are really inefficient buildings that are leaving hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans with energy bills that are too high, even though we know what we should do. And we kind of know how we might pay for it, but the first 10 or 50 or 100 projects need to get done with some underwriting maybe of that process less than the capital itself to pay for the upfront cost. And those projects are $50,000 to $100,000 if you're a 100-unit apartment building. And so they're not the size that are going to attract US Bank or Wells Fargo or a sophisticated structured finance broker, et cetera. I'm happy to talk more offline about the detail. You're spot on the general idea. So again, our goal is not to supplant the private sector nor to supplant existing authorities, but to really look at where are these opportunities to spur $1 billion, for instance, of clean energy investments. And we can either try to corral $1 billion of public money for that capital, which I don't think would make sense, or we can have the study come back and say, how could we spend very limited public money where it's needed to fill those gaps so that we could spur $1 billion of private sector investment, as you just described. I'll just also add quickly that I've seen 2 or 3 instances where 10 years ago I would have said it is the public's role to be engaged in that market making and to kind of do the first few moves, and now see billion-dollar tools out there in the marketplace working and working very, very well, where it's like, well, we're not needed in that space anymore, and that's the goal.
Final question from Representative Bowe, and then the super final question from Representative Swazinski. Representative Bowe.
I did not have a question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I have you on the list. I'm sorry. Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if the folks from the Commerce Department would mind coming back up, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So my question kind of just kind of surrounds the 1.15 to 1.7. So in kind of what is the manner in which the Commerce Department, because it's a shall contract, how will those bids be let out and how will that contracting work? And how does the Commerce Department do that in other types of projects like this?
Madam Chair, Representative Swazinski, we do usually put out RFPs for projects. I can get back to you with the exact process that we would use for this.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
So you're going to use a plain RFP, will that be allowed, so it talks about independent consultant, will that be forced to be, so under this, it can be open to the public, well, so the schools of higher education, so the university was mentioned, it may potentially do it. So it'll be open to privates, to publics, to anyone to make a bid, and then kind of how do those normally get paid?
Madam Chair, Representative Swazinski, I will get back to you with the answer on this particular language.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Representative Mahoney.
Madam Chair, to the author, to the testifier, we are one of the largest banking centers of the upper Midwest. We have probably 100,000 employees employed at 5 of the major banks in the area. This looks like a state-run bank, like North Dakota does, which is great. I mean, it would save us a lot of money. And this is a bill that's not, it has been seen before using different names. Back in the 80s, there was the Farm Crisis Bank. They wanted to create a bank for the farmers. We've seen it in a couple of others. So my question, the first one, have you spoken with the banking industry of Minnesota?
Representative Wagenius, Chair Wagenius, Representative. No, I haven't had that conversation, as this is just the very beginning of putting a study together. In the states that have green banks, they're hybrid sorts of models. So they're not a pure state bank like what North Dakota has. It's different than that. And I think as I've been hearing Mr. Kalin speak, he's talking about something quite different than that too. So what this study is going to do is investigate exactly what are the models in these other states, how are they different from one another, and what would be the best fit for the state of Minnesota, considering our unique needs and the resources that are available here, what would be the best model for us?
Well, Madam Chair and Representative Lippert, I do suggest that you engage the larger banking community. As a much more recent example, when we did some work up here on payday lenders, a good number of the small community banks stepped up with very short-term, relatively substantial interest, but short-term programs, loan programs for low-income families. And it might be a good example where you take that study to smaller community banks rather than creating a whole new state nose underneath the tent. So.
Representative Weinstein has the last question.
Thank you. It's not a question as much as a comment, just to thank both of you. I think this is a great idea. I think all we're doing is a study. I think you're asking the right questions in the study. And if it's been shown in other states to leverage significant new investment and the kinds of technologies and projects that we all need to, make the transitions we need to make in the energy sector, all the power to you. It's a great idea. I strongly support it.
Thank you. Nobody has signed up for public comment, so I'll renew my motion that House File 2566 be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Representative Stephenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that House File 1755 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus.
Thank you. House File 1755 has been laid over for, has been moved, and we are being given now a first division engrossment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to briefly explain to the committee members, the difference between the language as introduced in the first engrossment is really minor. There was an oral amendment that was added in Transportation Committee just to clarify that we're discussing specifically the buses that are operated by Metro Transit. Met Council has other bus and vehicles that are like buses that were not intended to be within the scope of what we're doing here. So in the Transportation Committee, there was an oral amendment to refine that further by adding a specific phrase linking it to Metro Transit. And you should see that in the first engrossment, which is being passed around. Member 1755 has a great opportunity to do something about carbon emissions in our transportation sector. During the course of this session, we've heard a lot about the climate crisis and the need to take aggressive action to curb carbon emissions in Minnesota. Well, thanks to our state's pioneering renewable energy standard, as well as the good work of our utility sector, most notably Xcel's recent announcement that they're going to be 100% carbon-free by 2050, electrical generation is no longer our state's leading source of carbon. And so we need to increase our focus on other carbon-emitting sectors and transportation in particular. The bill before you does just that by using renewable development account money to help the Met Council purchase electric buses to replace our current diesel fleet. RDA funds are appropriate because electric buses are going to assist Xcel with load management issues, by which I mean that the buses can charge when wind energy is plentiful at night and electrical demand is relatively weak. Replacing diesel buses with electrical buses will have a major impact on carbon emissions. Bloomberg recently reported that by the end of the year, electric buses will displace 270,000 barrels of diesel demand, which is more than 3 times of the world's electric passenger vehicles. Buses matter because of their size and their constant use. For every 1,000 electric buses on the road, 500 barrels of diesel are displaced each day, Bloomberg estimates. By comparison, 1,000 battery-operated electric vehicles remove 15 barrels of oil. In addition to the carbon emissions caused by our bus fleet, converting from diesel to electric improves air quality. MPCA says that air pollution causes 2,000 premature deaths every year. Recently, the Coalition for Clean Transportation, along with Twin Cities transit riders, canvassed transit riders to learn what they want from their transit system and found that improving health by reducing pollution is a critical concern. One rider said, "I have COPD, which is a chronic lung condition. I breathe in all the pollution from the bus every day." Another rider echoed the concern, saying, "My daughter has asthma, and when she's around pollution, her lungs get closed in. She always wears a scarf to cover her mouth." This bill also dovetails nicely with plans already in the works in Minnesota, as well as broader trends in the economy. In December, Metro Transit announced plans to start a transition to electric buses, and there's a great timing factor here. In fact, Metro Transit says 170 of their diesel buses need to be replaced in 2023 and 2024 alone. Furthermore, a report by Navigant Research, which is an international research firm, predicts electric buses will make up 27% of new bus sales in the United States by 2027. And finally, as you probably know, and as other testifiers will speak to, this bill has the high potential to create new jobs and sustain jobs right here in Minnesota, as the New Flyer company has an electric bus manufacturing facility in St. Cloud and another facility in Crookston. And with that, Madam Chair, I do have a couple of testifiers.
Yes, Representative Baker is going to wait for the testifiers if they would come up.
Mr. Pearson from Xcel is here.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jim Pearson, and I'm with Xcel Energy. I just wanted to comment a little bit in support of Representative Stephenson's bill. We, as a company, have worked with Metro Transit on a number of projects as they gain more experience with electric buses. And we have found through our conversations with Metro Transit that there's 2 main barriers. Both are capital barriers. One is the cost of the bus, which Representative Stephenson's bill addresses, and the other is the cost of the infrastructure in terms of charging mechanisms to make sure that bus barns and other places have the appropriate power to charge the buses when they need that charge. And so our focus has been primarily around that infrastructure piece and working with the Public Utilities Commission to provide some options that would benefit Metro Transit on that chunk. And so when you take that the work, or when you take the work we're doing with the commission and add it to the bill that Representative Stephenson has, then you're really addressing two of the largest barriers. So we are in support of the efforts being made and would be happy to answer questions if the committee has them.
And then I believe Ms. Meyer is here from the communication.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Wagenius and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mona Meyer, and I'm the president of the Communication Workers of America, Minnesota State Council. CWA represents 10,000 active and retired members in Minnesota, and I'm here today to speak in favor of House File 1755 on behalf of Local 7304, which are the New Flyer workers in St. Cloud and in Crookston. The world's leading scientific organizations have been very clear that climate change is a dire and urgent threat, and that the longer we delay, the stronger the action required. We believe there's a significant opportunity to create good-paying jobs in the state while adopting smart solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and avoid the worst impacts of a changing climate. We see House File 1755 as a smart solution that supports good-paying local jobs and reducing our greenhouse emissions. CWA Minnesota State Council supports purchasing more electric buses to help fight climate change, and we believe House File 1785 creates the opportunity for electric buses to be purchased from companies like New Flyer. New Flyer employs nearly 700 union members in St. Cloud and 300 members in Crookston. This is a diverse workforce that includes Latinx, Hmong, and Laotian employees. New Flyer workers start with a raw piece of steel and through approximately 1.5 miles of production line, create a top line bus that make up 40% of the bus fleets in North America. We want to thank Representative Stephenson for putting forth 1755 and giving us the time to share how our union members see their top line buses as part of the solution to reach our climate goals in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple of questions now, Representative Baker and then Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the author, I kind of like the idea of more electric buses on the road. I think I've been on a few of them, and I really do actually like them. What's the difference between a average new bus now, diesel, versus a electric? Just a difference in price right now. Are they double, maybe, on average? Just I'm looking for just a roundabout number. I have a couple questions.
Madam Chair, Representative Baker, you know, it actually depends a little bit on the model and the size of the bus, but I've heard estimates as low as a couple $100,000, as high as $400,000 to $500,000 in additional cost. And again, when you say double, it depends on the base cost too. So there is an increase in cost. The amount of the cost really depends on a lot of factors. The bill, of course, is not prescriptive in that respect. It allows Met Council to buy whatever is best suits their needs.
And to that, Madam Chair, I think it was kind of stated by Mr. Pearson from Excel that it's probably the capital investment that is slowing that down by the Met Council, because I think this is a good bill to even not have that funding mechanism in it, just because I think it's a good idea. Met Council should just do that. But also I know that we keep diving into the RDA fund for a lot of good ideas, and I think that's kind of what we all are going to start sorting through at the end is what are the best ideas and how do we do this? My concern is I want to make sure that we as a committee then also recognize this kind of stuff and these kind of new investments, that they have to be part of the real cost of doing business and to these new ideas or expanding the electric buses. So I also would ask the question, we should, by rights to the ratepayers of Minnesota, if we're buying a lot more expensive buses in the future, that's going to affect the rates for the riders. Do you anticipate some of that changes coming because of that, so that everybody can help participate in sort of this movement to cleaner air? I think it's a reasonable question, but I just want to know your thoughts as an author. If we get a few buses like this, but going forward, do you think that should be something we should be looking at?
Madam Chair, Representative Baker, I think one thing that's great about transitioning to electric buses is that once you get past that initial capital cost, their operational costs are much reduced. And so I think actually the costs to people who are using the system and to taxpayers who finance that system and support that system over the long run will be reduced if we reduce the cost here. Obviously, the money that this bill contemplates is not sufficient to entirely roll over the bus fleet. And so there will be, if we're going to completely do that, we're going to have some additional costs coming from other sources.
And final question, Madam Chair, when it sounds like you went through transportation already. Did the conversation come up with the MPCA about the recent Volkswagen settlement? And could there be funds used in that settlement that is there? Because I know there was a focus on busing and buses. So I'm just kind of curious if that is an option for funding instead of the RDA. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, Representative Baker, the conversation did not come up in the Transportation Committee that I recall about the Volkswagen settlement. I could be wrong, but I don't recall that. There was some discussion about the funding source. As I mentioned a minute ago, the money that's appropriated in this bill is not enough to entirely roll over the bus fleet that Met Council operates. And so looking at other sources in order to accomplish the overall goal of changing over to an electric bus fleet is going to be necessary.
Representative Bowe is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. First question is, I haven't heard anything about performance standards on buses, and I'm curious how much of a distance you can go between charges. I have this vision in my mind of a bus full of people suffering from range anxiety, and wondering how far can they go, how many miles, how many hours. Does it necessitate having to pull over and charge for a period of time, so you'd actually need more buses to continue to run a route and things like that?
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, again, much like the cost consideration, the question of range really depends on the variety of bus you are purchasing. You can find buses that have ranges in the 100 to 200 mile space. You can find buses that have longer ranges. It depends. I think that Metro Transit has made it very clear that they are going to move to the electric bus space and that they've had those discussions about whether they can operate their fleet in such a way that they don't interrupt services. I take them, they're a professional organization. I was a bus commuter for many, many years. Buses run out of diesel too, and I never had the experience of pulling over the side of the road because the bus ran out of gas. So I trust in their expertise to manage whatever charging needs, just like right now they manage their fuel needs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secondly, are there any safety concerns? I hear that from people who have had issues with electric cars where they sneak up on them because they're so quiet, and I wonder if the same thing will happen on a larger scale with a bus.
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, it's a new concern to me that the quietness of buses is problematic. I actually think electric buses will prove out to be safer in the long run. They have a lower center of gravity, which means that they will operate better in winter conditions. So I think they're actually safer. And as we already discussed, the air pollution that are caused by diesel buses is a big safety concern, contributes to many premature deaths around Minnesota every year.
Very good, thank you. And one final question, Madam Chair. What about the poor folks in the suburbs? This is all for Metro Transit and nothing for the suburban opt-outs.
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, I live in the suburbs and we have Metro Transit service, so I guess I would disagree with your assertion that there's nothing for the people in the suburbs. Of course, this is using renewable development account money, and so we think it's important to stay within the XL service territory, which aligns pretty well with Metro Transit service territory.
There's a lot of folks in my district who are XL customers, but yet we don't have Metro Transit. We have Southwest Transit, a suburban opt-out, and so, they're nary a word in here for those suburban opt-outs. So just curious. Thank you.
Representative Mecklin.
Madam Chair, actually, I have an amendment. If we can move that.
Offer that now?
I would like to. And I would also, afterwards, I'd like to talk a little bit about New Flyer. I've actually toured it, and I think we could have some good conversation. My A1 amendment, if I may so do so, is to limit charging these buses when we're peaking on our renewable energy, rather than when we're peaking on our coal-based base load, if that would be something you would consider.
Madam Chair, regretfully, I think the amendment's unworkable, and I would oppose it.
Representative Long.
Madam Chair, I oppose the amendment as well. Just if the goal is to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which it seems to be, and it would be a goal that I support, then the proper point of comparison is not coal to wind in terms of the generation. It's gas that the vehicles are using right now to whatever is being produced in the electric space. And gas vehicles only convert about 12 to 30% of the gas into moving the vehicle forward, whereas electric vehicles are much more efficient. They convert about 72 to 94% of the energy used into moving it forward. So even if you were to compare pure coal to gas, you're almost always going to get a better efficiency out of an electric vehicle. And when just looking at the Excel territory, when you're charging electric vehicles on Excel's system currently, where coal does exceed wind, there's still a 65% greenhouse gas reduction compared to using gas. So I don't think this achieves your goal, which I would imagine is greenhouse gas reduction.
There's an amendment before us, members. All of those in favor say aye.
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 The opposition say nay.
Nay.
No.
Amendment does not pass.
If I may.
Representative Macklin.
Madam Chair, so back to the New Flyer facility, if you haven't toured it, it is quite the thing. They do electric buses, natural gas buses, as well as diesel. And if you would like to tour it, I'd be more than happy to set up. They do reach out constantly to ask if we would be interested, and it's quite the learning process. And I think, as someone said, the process and how they move through there is something to actually see. And I do have a lot of friends that work there, so if you're interested. And actually, to Representative Bowe's concern, you can always invest in the natural gas buses. They have a longer range. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to second that, Representative Macklin. The Transportation Committee took a tour of New Flyer about a month ago, and very impressive. And I think it's important for the committee to know that they are really increasing their manufacture of the electric vehicles because they're in demand in other transit systems. California even has I think, a goal to have an entire electric fleet by 2029. But Representative Stephenson made, I think, the point that I wanted to make initially, and I'll just reiterate that while the sticker price may be a little bit more, there are significant savings in maintenance, significant savings in fuel costs. And then, of course, the externalities, which the chair has been very good at reminding me about, which is, those costs to our health and environment, as well as the climate. So I do think this is a smart investment, and I think there's a variety of funding sources. This is just one, but I think it's a helpful one, and I strongly support your bill. Thank you.
Representative Straczynski has the last comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a few questions about the bill. So just kind of in general, I think this is the only stop. Obviously, I'm not transportation. Maybe it could be referred to, but where does the money come from for the rest of the bus? So is it gas tax? Is it, what's the funding mechanism that Met Council uses for the rest of the bus?
I can tell you it is not the gas tax. The gas tax only funds roads and bridges.
And then, is there any thought to, Madam Chair, to the testifier, just from a higher cost standpoint? I think the reason why, this part of this is moving forward is to kind of lessen the cost to the Met Council. Is there any thought to, I've also often heard in this room that, hey, I'd gladly pay more for, green energy or whatever that might be, rather than just kind of create a pot to use. Any thought to creating kind of a revolving loan where you actually charge for the increased cost of this bus, and so that people, when they choose to get on that bus, that they could pay an extra amount above and beyond the normal rate that would go into a revolving loan fund that essentially the state could set up so that the Met Council could purchase more, so that the customers are actually paying for it, not just ratepayers, so essentially twice.
Madam Chair, Representative, it's an interesting idea, but I prefer this more direct approach, and I do think that the customers of Metro Transit will contribute to both the cost and the operation of the buses. So I would disagree a little bit with your characterization.
Okay, and then just one last, so from so let's say this didn't move forward, but the Met Council continued to maybe purchase, with a plan to purchase an electric bus. What is a current bus ride cost now? As a rural person, I don't know. And what would the increase cost be if there wasn't any public support for the increased cost of an electric bus? Like what would that mean to the average, either what is the current subsidy? What would be the subsidy if it wasn't? And then what would be the current cost? I mean, is there anyone from the transit folks here that would be able to answer that?
Representative Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't know that there's anyone here who could answer the question. I can partially answer the first part of your question about does it cost. As I said, I was a bus commuter for many years, and it really depends on when you're riding the bus and where you're going, whether you're going in rush hour or on a local route or an express route. It very much depends, and also it depends on whether you are, for example, a veteran or a senior citizen, or if you are a monthly commuter. So it's highly variable, and so I think your question, your broader question, is also a very complex one. I'm not sure that there's an easy answer to that one.
I'd love to be able to sit down with folks from the area there to talk about it, because I think that's important, because I think, as we're, this is essentially what this is getting after, and, looking at lessening the cost of the buses, deploying a different type of technology here and subsidizing it from a ratepayer standpoint, what that would mean, in the mix to the rest. And is there no one from the Met Council here to speak on this bill?
I don't think so. So can,
I'm done.
is that your last question? Representative Bowe has the last question, and we're going to lay this over.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not even a question, but just wanted to clarify. One of the questions that was asked a few minutes ago was where the dollars come from to pay for buses. And a good number of the dollars that come in to pay for buses comes from MVES, the motor vehicle sales tax, for the purchase of vehicles. So I just wanted to clarify that question. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Representative Stevens renews his motion that House File 1755 be laid over for possible inclusion. Representative Stevenson, you have another bill.
I do, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would move House File 2618 for possible inclusion in our omnibus.
Thank you. Representative Stephen has moved 2618 be laid over for possible inclusion. Would you want to discuss your bill and bring up your testifier? So we're moving along quickly. I am.
So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I won't repeat all the earlier commentary I had about the benefits of electric buses versus diesel buses. We're still talking about that dynamic at play, but instead of talking about Metro Transit, we're now talking about school buses. And we're talking about a much narrower piece of the pie here because we're only talking about doing a demonstration grant. And I don't want to say too much about this because my testifier is going to speak, but I will say that Great River Energy, in connection with the Lakeville School District, has had a project like this in place that they are they should be commended for their great work on, that's achieving great results. And we want to make sure that we give other communities in the state the opportunity to have a similar experience. And I would add on top of that we have a lot to learn about electric buses in our school bus fleet, that we should try and glean that knowledge before the transformation really begins in earnest over the next few years. So this is an opportunity for us to collect information that will assist us when it is ultimately time to transition from diesel to electric. But with that, I would turn it over to my testifier.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Stacy Fuji. I'm with Great River Energy. As I am here to testify, as Representative Stevenson said, in support of House File 2618. We believe it makes a very measured, good step forward in the realm of beneficial electrification or electrification of our transportation system. So as Representative Stevenson said, in 2017, Great River Energy, one of our co-ops, Dakota Electric Association, partnered with Schmitty & Sons to purchase an electric school bus for the Lakeville School District. In the fall of 2017, when that school bus started running, it was the first electric school bus in the Midwest to operate. And so we thought that was a very good thing. I will tell you that, as others have talked about, the cost of that is very high. So in 2017, when we looked to purchase a school bus, the only manufacturing company that was willing to work with us was Lion Electric School Bus Company out of Montreal. The starting cost of that school bus was $325,000, so it's not an insignificant amount of money. Since then, I know my folks have kept track of the cost of electric school buses. They have come down about 5 to 6%, but still that's a lot of money. And Great River Energy, neither Great River Energy nor our members have the kind of budget that would allow us to fully support this type of program. We also know that school districts don't have very large transportation budgets as well, which is why we really like House File 2618. So it does a number of things. First, it is a grant program. It is not a requirement. So a school district that really wants to look into this has the opportunity to apply for a grant. Second, it does require a partnership. As Mr. Pearson talked about, we look at the infrastructure of this. So it does require the electric utility to provide the charging station. We also think it's important to have that partnership because it allows us to have a conversation with the school districts as well and to look at other programs that we offer. So if we look at the Lakeville School District, Schmidt & Sons is a member of Dakota Electric Association, and they chose to be a part of our Revolt program, which allows them to charge that school bus with 100% renewable energy. We simply retire renewable energy credits on their behalf for as long as they have the bus. We think the third component, as Representative Stephenson talked about, is the reporting requirement. You all should know, the school district should know all the positives and negatives that come with this as you make policy decisions going forward. So, and in answer to a couple of questions that I've heard for the previous bill, to Representative Bowe's question, this school bus currently goes 82 miles per day. It makes 96 stops a day. And for quietness, as the bus approaches students, there's music that plays so that the students know it's coming. Whatever the school district would like. And finally, as I said, the price that we paid was probably, it's about 3 times as much as a brand-new diesel bus. So, but again, I think this is a good measured step forward. We hope that the committee considers this bill favorably. Thank Representative Stephenson for all his work, for listening to our experiences, as well as some of our concerns and our suggestions for this bill. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
I don't see. Oh, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just how many buses do you think this grant program would actually purchase at $500,000?
Representative Stephenson.
Madam Chair, Representative, I think, again, it's going to depend very much on the specific projects. And then these buses vary tremendously in cost, and as was just testified to, they're declining in cost as well. So my answer would be more than one.
Okay. And then is this, I forget where the money comes from here. Is this?
General fund.
General fund. So it could be for any district across the state. Is there any thought to having, if there's more than one, that one would be a metro, one would be a rural? Would you be open to anything along those lines, so that we could guarantee diversification across the state?
Madam Chair, Representative, I think that's it's an interesting suggestion. We're laying this bill over for possible inclusion in the omnibus, and if it makes it in the omnibus, I think that's an idea worth considering.
And
It's a
then,
good idea, I hadn't thought.
Thank you. And then just one other thought, just what's kind of from a lasting standpoint, the average life expectancy of a diesel bus versus an electric bus, kind of what has been seen from the technology, and if you could talk a little bit about that, and where are they made by Flyer in Minnesota? Where are some of these where are school buses even made?
Madam Chair, Representative, and I don't know if you have information about some of those specific questions. I believe that the lifespan of the bus itself is longer than a diesel bus. The question is the lifespan of the battery, and how long that is. So I don't have specific information for you about, but that's kind of my general understanding of it. In terms of manufacturing, I think you heard the testifier say that they had to look outside of Minnesota. I'm unaware. I don't know if Mr. Mecklin knows if Flyer is now engaged in that business. I honestly don't know the answer.
And then just one last question. So it talked a little bit in your testimony that the school also has to provide a charging station. Is that an applicable use of the grant dollars, or is it simply the purchase of the bus?
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, no, it's the utility that provides this charging station under this bill.
Okay, so it would have to be not only the school district applying for the grant, but also the district and the utility district that they want to kind of partner into this together.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, it's the school district, if they contract with a private company, like Schmidt & Sons is a private company, in concert with the electric utility company, so it's all going to be working together.
And then just from a charging standpoint, Representative Mecklin did have that amendment talking about the bus use and when it could be potentially charged. Are there any rules, like, obviously when you put in a water heater, or if the school district is already under an energy saving plan, or the businesses under energy saving plan, would the times in which the charger could be utilized, would those be, qualified underneath that and for the use?
Madam Chair, Representative, I don't believe that there's any language in the bill that restricts the school district.
There is an amendment coded A1. Is anyone going to be offering that?
No, Madam Chair, we'll be pulling that.
I don't see further discussion, and no one else signed up from the Representative Bowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions real quick, if I may. If a school district is given a grant through this program, do they then own that bus? And you know what I mean? Does the grant give them the ability to purchase that bus and then they own it and are responsible for maintenance and upkeep and new battery and that sort of stuff from that point forward?
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, if a school district received a grant to purchase the bus, yes, they would own the bus.
Okay.
I believe that is
Madam
correct.
Chair, is there any way that we can have some sort of an agreement that if you get a grant, then you would be agreeing to show the bus to other school districts and, allow other districts to see the advantages of having an electric bus by being able to see one, ride in one, things like that? Because there'll be very few that will have them right off the bat, and this might be a nice way to spread that out a little more.
Madam Chair, Representative Bowe, that's another interesting idea that I think is worth thinking about as we think about what's going to be in the omnibus. One thing I would say to that point is I know that Dakota Electric and Lakeville and everyone involved in that project is very proud of it, and I don't hesitate to talk about it. And so I think that they will be, the people who are participating in this, my guess is they will be happy to share that experience with their school districts. That's not to say your idea isn't a good one. I just think that there will be good sharing there.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, one last, just off the top of my head thought, and hopefully that music it plays when it pulls up won't make the kids run out in the street thinking the ice cream truck is coming or something. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Representative Stephenson renews his motion that House File 2618 be laid over for possible inclusion. We'll next hear from Representative Long, House File 2625.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that House File 2625 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus.
Thank you, Representative Long. If you would discuss your bill, and I know that there are two folks from out of town that I want to make sure get to testify today.
Great.
This
I'll
morning.
try to be brief because I know we don't have much time and we have a lot of people who want to testify. Minnesotans are concerned about climate change and they want options to be able to take action in their own life to promote renewable energy. Community solar is a simple concept that individuals can own a part of a project and receive the benefits while pooling their resources so they don't have to bear the burden of an entire project. Anyone can participate, from homeowners to businesses to cities or schools to churches or community groups. This allows subscribers who would not otherwise install solar to be able to take advantage. Minnesota has hands down the most successful community solar program in the country. Under the leadership of our own Speaker, Melissa Hortman, the legislature passed its community solar program in 2013. Minnesota's community solar program hit a record 513 megawatts of operational capacity last month, which is about 1.5% of Excel's total energy mix. Since that time in 2013, when the bill was passed, Minnesota has installed 98% of its current solar capacity. Last year alone, 91% of new solar capacity came from community solar gardens. More than 10,000 Minnesota residential customers are saving money with a community solar subscription. The average savings on an electric bill is about 5%. Nearly 1/3 of the total program capacity serves public entities like schools, helping to reduce their energy prices as well. The program has also meant local jobs for the Minnesotans who've installed these 513 megawatts of solar. It has been a resounding success, but there have been challenges. The Public Utilities Commission has faced years of debate over many aspects of the program. While we have seen many residential subscribers participate, there have been challenges to increasing the percentage of residential subscribers, and there's also much we have learned over the 5 years the program has operated. This bill attempts to respond to some of those challenges. First, the bill increases the size limit for projects to 3 megawatts while leaving in place the current prohibition on co-location. The original legislation allowed for 1 megawatt projects, but was not specific on co-location of these 1 megawatt projects, which led to some project proposals as large as 40 megawatts of co-located projects and much dispute between Xcel and developers. This has led to confusion about the legislative intent, and the end result was that the PUC imposed a 1 megawatt cap with no co-location. The 3 megawatt proposal is a reasonable compromise between some of the larger project proposals that Xcel received early in the program and 1 megawatt proposals which limit the affordability of the offerings to community solar subscribers. Second, the bill allows for projects that can sell to subscribers in non-contiguous counties if they agree to sell at least 10% residential to residential subscribers and to a 100-foot setback from residential property. This provision is a way to help additional farmers gain access to the program and provide benefits to more counties and communities. The provision passed the Senate last session in an overwhelming bipartisan vote. Third, the bill would move the administration of the program from Xcel Energy to the Department of Commerce. Given the contentious nature of the disputes between developers and Xcel Energy throughout the life of the community solar program, this is a fair way to have a neutral entity and to ensure transparency with the process. It would also remove the real or perceived conflict of interest that comes from Xcel overseeing the program. The Department of Commerce has the experience with this program to successfully facilitate its day-to-day management, and the PUC would retain its current responsibilities for review and setting rates. Many other states that have community solar programs use independent administrators, such as Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. Fourth, the bill establishes a new program for community access projects. These projects are designed to help expand community solar access into low-income communities by adjusting the rate offering for projects that commit to serving low-income customers. And fifth, the bill allows community solar to benefit low-income customers who participate in the Low-Income Heating Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. This model can provide affordable cost savings to low-income families, helping lift them out of energy poverty while also creating new solar energy systems. We have had time to see what is working well with our community solar program and where we can make improvements. This bill builds on an already successful program to ensure even more Minnesotans will have access to the option to choose solar energy. With that, maybe we can take the two testifiers who had to travel before I bring my testifiers up.
There are two, just one. Will Kenworthy, and then we'll take other testifiers after that. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is Will Kenworthy. I'm Regulatory Director for the Midwest for Vote Solar, which is a national nonprofit solar advocacy organization. We work in 26 states around the country. Community solar here in Minnesota is a nation-leading program, giving tens of thousands of electricity customers new and better access to clean, affordable solar power. Vote Solar works on community solar around the country, and I would say that we and our colleagues around the country view the Minnesota program nationally as an example of leadership in this sector of the solar industry. Looking back on the 6 years of development of community solar in Minnesota, there's a lot to be proud of. The program spurred the development of hundreds of solar projects, serving tens of thousands of customers. Even more exciting, this program has been flexible enough to accommodate a diversity of projects. In fact, under this program, we've seen development of smaller, community-owned projects that allow neighbors to work together to build their own solar resource, creating value in the neighborhoods, creating local jobs, and capturing bill savings. But 6 years after the program started, a reboot is warranted to set the program up for even more success. To date, the program has not provided what we view as a desirable level of access for residential Minnesotans, particularly low and moderate income. These households are the ones who spend the highest portion of their salaries on energy, and often they are caught in a cycle where lack of capital blocks access to solutions that can help them manage their energy costs. This program can open the door to better financial health for financially stressed households, while also creating jobs and economic development in economically disadvantaged neighborhoods. It's time to start building on the success and to reboot this program to expand the universe of beneficiaries, and that's what Representative Long's bill will do. Most importantly, HF 2625 would make community solar accessible to low and moderate income customers who have the greatest need of affordable energy options that have largely been unable to participate in the Minnesota community solar marketplace. The bill creates a new category of community solar project, the Community Access Project, which must be at least 50% subscribed by residential customers and is tailored to meet the needs of low or moderate income customers. These provisions will spur the development of more projects that are community designed and expand access to solar for households who can benefit the most. In addition, the bill would expand economic development benefits to the program to rural areas outside the areas bordering the Twin Cities, so that more landowners can access the state can bolster their farm revenue with solar revenue. Third, the bill provides a modest increase in the size limit for the projects from 1 to 3 megawatts to allow for greater economies of scale. For these reasons, Vote Solar is happy to support this bill. We appreciate all the work that has gone into making Minnesota community solar work, as well as the continuous learning and adjusting that it takes to make it adapt to meet new challenges and achieve greater benefits for more customers. Thank you for your time and work on this issue.
Representative Swedzinski, we will have one question for this witness, and I have one more witness coming before.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can't come
So
back.
just a question. In your testimony, you said this is affordable solar, yet when I look at the numbers, and that's why you support it, this is probably the most expensive solar in the world. How can you, I mean, solar I think market solar is at 4, and, this bill actually works to increase the cost of solar above and beyond what it already is. How?
Yeah, I mean, there will be other witnesses who can testify more about the actual cost of the program here. What we're focused on is the impact that it has on ratepayers who are subscribers to the program and the savings that are available to them. That's what we view as one of the important benefits. I mean, on the other important benefit is, the economic development opportunities that's available for local installers to build these projects.
Thank you. The next testifier is Corina Crump. Is that the only two?
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Corina Cumpy. I'm the Director of Legal Affairs at SunShare, a Colorado-based community solar garden developer, owner, and operator. SunShare was founded in 2011, which in terms of solar years is relatively ancient. And we've grown into one of the leading community solar garden companies in the nation. We're active across all community solar garden verticals: development, customer acquisition and management, construction and management, finance, and project operation and management. SunShare has been on the forefront of community solar in Minnesota since its inception and has signed up more residential customers than any other developer combined. We have developed and transacted on over 100 megawatts of community solar gardens, with 77 of those megawatts in Minnesota alone and 12.5 in the last 2 years. We've subscribed 8,500 of the almost 11,000 of the state's current residential community solar subscribers on 20 or 25-year contracts. While our offices are located in Colorado, our hearts and 24 active solar gardens are here in Minnesota. I traveled here on behalf of SunShare to add our voice to the many folks already fighting the good fight for renewable energy. We are committed to Minnesota and would like to develop more community solar here, and we'd like to see some changes to the legislation that would allow us to continue down this path. Minnesota is home to one of the best community solar programs in the U.S. In the fall of 2018, there were 134 community solar gardens in the state, equaling 445 megawatts of capacity. And there is a continued desire by Minnesotans to participate in community solar. We typically maintain wait lists on all of our projects of at least 10%. That means that we have people waiting here in Minnesota to participate in community solar. We support this legislation because we support the goal of reducing costs through economies of scale. In a time when community solar is under attack here in Minnesota, we encourage the legislature to improve the program, strengthen the commitment to economical, safe, and clean forms of energy. This bill helps to modernize the community solar statute to increase access and lower costs for Minnesota participants. Right now, only about 10% of community solar capacity is residential, with a balance of 90% of the program's participation coming from businesses, nonprofits, or state and local government agencies. The barriers to achieving more residential participants are based primarily in cost. It simply takes more money, time, and resources to service 227 residential customers versus the 3 to 4 C&I customers it takes to fill a 1 megawatt garden. We subscribe residential customers through a variety of acquisition channels, including door-to-door, online, and telesales, meaning we have a salesperson go out to each person's home. We have a customer management team responsible for following up with subscribers, answering subscriber questions, and ensuring satisfaction with the program. We are responsible for payment processing on all of these subscribers. All of these things are incrementally more expensive when performing for hundreds of residential subscribers versus only a handful of C&I customers. We ask that you allow developers to take advantage of economies of scale in community solar because lower project costs equal lower customer costs. And you can do this first by increasing individual project cap size. Basic economies of scale provide that when you can build a bigger project, you can lower the overall cost per subscriber. Community solar from its inception was expected to be a little more expensive than its large-scale counterpart because these gardens are limited in size. There's more design and development cost when compared with each garden's output than there is a large solar farm. If we increase project sizes, we can spread fixed distribution grid upgrade costs over more megawatts, enabling more projects at lower costs. And then also removing county location requirements for gardens serving residential customers. The days of easily acquiring affordable land in or near large metropolitan areas where residential subscribers are located is a thing of the past. If we want to reduce overall costs, allowing developers to build in the areas where land is less expensive will go a long way toward achieving that goal, not to mention allowing for the development of underutilized land, including farmland. Additionally, spreading out CSGs increases geographic diversity of interconnections and increases access, economic development, and tax base for rural communities. The SunShare experience has always been and continues to be about community and transformation through education. We take great pride in our commitment to making it possible for anyone to benefit from clean, locally produced solar energy. And we'd like to continue our efforts here in Minnesota, and we support this bill as a way of making community solar more accessible and affordable to Minnesotans. Thank you, committee and Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, we have one more person I was just informed from out of town, from outstate Minnesota, and I would like to have them testify if that is okay. But if you want to make a quick question to the testifier, I don't know if members can.
Madam Chair, I do respect that the person traveled, so I will withhold my question, but I would like to ask this particular testifier some questions. So why don't we bring that person up, and then if we could stay an extra 2 minutes to get a couple of questions.
I am willing to stay an extra 2 minutes, so if we could bring up the James Edens. Yes, if you could.
Madam
Thank you for
Chair,
coming.
members of the committee, good morning. My name is Jason Edens, and I'm the director of the Renewable Energy Alliance, or REAL. And first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for your service to the state of Minnesota and your energy leadership. And I also want to commend Representative Long for this courageous community solar bill. I'm here today from the small community of Pine River in northern Minnesota to express my support for ensuring that low-income Minnesotans can participate in the solar energy economy. REAL, our organization, is a nonprofit that has been delivering solar to low-income households and low-income communities since our inception in 2000. For the past 2 decades, as a fully licensed solar contractor, we have been demonstrating that solar energy is also an important tool in the fight against energy poverty. Our organization has been working very closely with community action agencies and tribal energy assistance programs to model a fiscally conservative and environmentally appropriate solution to energy poverty. About 500,000 Minnesotans face difficult choices each and every heating season, and I'm not referring to whether we're going to ski at Lutsen or Spirit Mountain. I'm referring to whether we're going to pay the home energy bill or the health care bill, the home energy bill or the housing bill. When families have to choose between home energy and other basic needs, we are living in what is often called energy poverty. Fortunately for Minnesotans struggling with energy poverty, families can turn to the Energy Assistance Program, or the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, to ensure their well-being during the grueling heating season. Although energy assistance is a critical service and one that I've personally received for many years, a stopgap is not a solution. Paying low-income families energy bills year after year unabated is a necessary service, but we believe that there's a better way to provide the exact same service. Here in Minnesota, we spend $100 million each and every year serving 1/5 of the low-income population that's eligible for energy assistance. So over the course of the next 10 years, a $1 billion investment won't even put a dent in energy poverty. Although it's an important service, there is absolutely no return on investment whatsoever to the taxpayer, because it does not permanently address energy poverty, nor does it actually empower low-income families. So rather than simply paying low-income families energy bills year after year, our organization has been delivering solar energy and community solar solutions directly to low-income households, again, as a financially responsible and environmentally appropriate solution. This bill will help advance that fiscally responsible solution to energy poverty by allowing community action agencies to own and operate community solar arrays, which can be used to provide bill assistance. Furthermore, it is pragmatic to work with community action agencies and energy assistance service providers, because those agencies have been doing low-income verification for decades. Although there's a lot of discussion about making solar more accessible, the only way to ensure that subscribers are in fact low income is to partner with community action agencies and energy assistance providers that are verifying that certain households are in fact low income. If we want to make a transition to a low carbon future and a low carbon Minnesota, we must include our low income households and communities, and low income households must have agency in choosing where their energy comes from. We can model a more cost-effective energy assistance program, a more effective service delivery model, and achieve our state's renewable energy aspirations. Please demonstrate your fiscal leadership and your energy leadership by supporting this important community solar bill. Thank you.
Representative Swedzinski has a question.
Thank
and
you.
then Representative Baker, and then we will.
Thank you. And this would be to Mrs. Crump? Is that? Kumpe, sorry. I'm, Kumpe. All right. So, Anna, so my understanding is you traveled from Colorado to
We
testify
did,
today?
yes.
Thank you for doing that. Just, how many solar gardens do you have currently going in Colorado?
Well, we have, let me see, we currently have, not sure in Colorado, we have 29 in total. So the bulk of them are here.
So
in-
5, probably?
Yeah.
So what's the cost of community solar? So what was the reimbursement? So we're, 12 to 16 cents. What is it going on in Colorado right
Oh,
there?
that's hotly debated right now.
Sure.
It's under consideration, and we have a lot of these efforts going on right now to figure out what the rate is going to be on a going forward basis.
So would you say the other community solar gardens you have are in Colorado and the rest are here in Minnesota?
That's correct.
What percentages of your employees are based in Colorado versus here in Minnesota, non-installers?
Our headquarters are in Colorado, but we utilize a lot of independent contractors here in Minnesota. We have some employees that are located here in Minnesota.
Okay, and then, so it would be fair to say a vast majority of your stuff is right here in Minnesota. And then of your 24 solar gardens that you do have in the state, we talked a little bit about that mix. So if you were to say, of those 24, what percentages are from a generation standpoint or commercial, and what are residential?
So they're predominantly residential. We don't have any solely residential gardens here in Minnesota, but we usually have a garden with maybe 1 or 2 C&I customer, and the remainder are residential customers.
As a percentage of customers in total, so a vast majority are residential, but how about actual consumption? So the actual ownership. So if you take the ownership structure of each of those gardens, would you say, 75% of those gardens are the commercial, and then the 25 left over are for the residential. What would you say your percentages is?
I would say it's more like 80-20
So,
in favor of residential.
okay, so, all right, and then that's about what I had, so thank you very much. So if you could get back to the committee on kind of what the rates are in Colorado and other places that you might be looking, I'd appreciate it, so. thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Representative Baker?
Madam Chair, and also to the testifier, I think you misstated that. I think I heard you earlier say about 90% of your subscribers are commercial, nonprofits, and schools and the like, I think. Did you misstate that? Because that's what I thought I heard earlier.
No, I said that currently 10% of community solar capacity is residential overall, with the balance of 90% of the program's participation coming from businesses.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you. And again, and this is maybe more of a statement too, because I know we're going to dive into this tomorrow in kind of continuing this conversation, because this is my first chance to really dive in deep with kind of the community solar program. So I hope that today the developers are ready to kind of, as the earlier testifier said, we need a reset. We sort of need to dive in deeper on how this program works and the savings that it's giving people that are currently on a solar system program, but really the real cost though, and how it's all split out later on with the developer fees and the charges and the credits. I want to make sure that we're prepared to do that tomorrow when we kind of reconvene on this, because this is really an important thing, that if we continue to expand this and we do it at a higher rate than what we can, like almost 3 times the rate of what we can buy utility solar for, because I like solar. I think we should continue to expand it. And it has gotten so cheap so fast, it's making this model requiring a deeper dive when we are really expanding the program and sharing the cost of this, real cost of community garden solar to others. I just want to make sure that folks that are coming back, I want to make sure we're ready to talk about that, because I need to understand this better and deeper. So with that, I just want
Thank
to
you.
look forward to that for tomorrow.
Representative Baker, we are recessing till after session.
Oh, perfect.
So
That's even better
we are
yet.
going
I
to
can go
be.
home then. That's good.
Well, if we get finished after session, then we will not come back tomorrow. However, if we don't finish after session, we will come back tomorrow. So with that, members, we are in recess, and we will reconvene immediately after session in room 400 North.
Thank you.